one major use case that you touched upon has to do with like gaming, right? So high throughput, low latency, and also low gas fees. Dr. Kate kind of mentioned gas as a major component, and a lot of people don't talk about it. Very under discussed because especially for more expensive like chains like Ethereum, the gas cost becomes an economic barrier. So using novel cryptography, we can actually have more gas efficient economies of scale, X, Y, and Z. And we at Supra pay a lot of attention to that. But one conversation about I would love to kind of talk about randomness on chain. So GameFi games are going to be, in my personal opinion, one of those major unlocks to bring a lot of people into the blockchain ecosystem, many of which initially will not even realize they're using a blockchain. But to have great gameplay, we need low latency, we need efficient gas costs, and we need on-chain randomness. So most blockchains are very orderly, deterministic, and therefore actually lack randomness. Let's talk about this topic for a second. Why is on-chain randomness difficult, and what are the most promising approaches? Maybe we can start with Dr. Kate, and then Dr.
He's the expert. He's the expert on this. I totally agree.
You're both experts, I'm sure. Guaranteed.
Yeah, thanks. No, it's a very important question. Actually, I want to make a confession here. Initially, I thought this will be an easy problem, but more and more time I spent here, I see that I can easily see so many combinations and a lot of headache to deal with. Let me put it this way, simply. So, first of all, let me start with the on-chain randomness could be thought of as having some kind of entropy on blockchain, and it's hard. The initial thought was possibly we can use block hash as a mechanism to have some kind of a randomness and use it, but it's in almost all environment universally. It is certainly something that decided by the proposer of the block or the miners or the validator or something, and they have a say, so they can easily bias it. They may not be able to bias it completely in some environment. In some environment they can. However, they can easily make it biased. They can always make sure that let's make some bits zeros or some bits one by appropriately selecting some transition orders. And in many examples, as we use randomness, we might be only using few bits of entropy, and they will be able to control that easily. So, if you don't have any access to any good randomness, block hash is a good starting point, but it's certainly not useful once you have any kind of a environment available where you want much better like unbiasability and unpredictability property associated with your random. And to add into that, then the idea will be that typically approach towards getting such randomness is to use concept from the distributed cryptography, such as verifiable random function. I want to add there one aspect which was also somewhat less appreciated before blockchain, and that is the concept of public verifiability. Games today, in my understanding, want public verifiability, that they want to prove that not only they are using randomness that is provided by services which are creating that following cryptographic standards and as well as provably secure protocols, but they also want to make sure it's publicly verifiable so that their current players as well as their new players or their potential future players can verify that correct. And that adds another interesting feature that typically, along with the unbiasability and unpredictability that you want. The reason why I think that initially I thought it's easy but it's hard is that once we have mechanisms in place where we are using this randomness for different game purpose, where there's a game owners and the players and dynamic between them, these properties could be not trusting each other well. That introduces several interesting combinations, and in terms of how to employ these random functions effectively and efficiently using any blockchain environment remains to be an interesting challenge. In fact, what we are looking into is that we have to characterize game, understand the game, their needs, and correspondingly decide how should this be built. And if this game has to employ mechanisms where gas cost is going to play the role, we have to see how can we save the gas cost, and also at the same time latency is the issue. If we are accessing these randomness services and it's going to take just 10 minutes to just get access to the randomness, it may be too late. They may not be able to keep the users interested for that long duration. So making sure that the latency that gets introduced with the existence of blockchain added for accounting and public verifiability should not affect the speed of the game is certainly one of the interesting challenges in this space. So, coming back to the thing is that, employing random beacon protocols and verifiable random functions are interesting approaches towards improving and adding entropy to the blockchain environment and through that the games. However, making sure that the latency is low and the protocols are gas cost are efficient in terms of the gas cost is a challenge that has to be looked into and carefully understand.
I totally agree, and I will add on this on the business side because, as a co-founder, I can see what's happening on the gaming industry. There are like situations, for example, in Asia, like gacha loot box and some other like types of games are so popular that, and also by culture, some folks in different countries are very sensitive on the verifiability. That I believe these systems should be a standard around this verifiable randomness, and obviously we need to find a way that people are convinced about how it's happening. I remember very recently I had a tweet, why no country until now hasn't used a verifiable public randomness even for the lottery, the national lottery and everything, right? Because people always have question marks in the back of their mind. There are many ways to cheat in this situation, especially if there is a physical ping-pong ball like randomness. And now we have blockchains. And I remember answering this question even on front of regulators, that in some particular situation, the blockchain is offering for the first time a public ledger where, along with the verifiability of the randomness, it's the only way to ensure that nobody is cheating. And this is super useful as a functionality that is offered by Web3, right? And I believe we say gamings now. I can see in the future how bigger, even statistical sampling and other things that they have to be verifiable, even from IRS, right? They should happen with this kind of technology, like verifiable randomness, with many committee members offering some entropy into the system. Maybe VDFs, maybe we can even use the oracles to give, the closing prices of the stock market at the second decimal digit, and then there is an extra source of entropy into the system, right? And I believe, apart from gaming, we will see major, even governmental operations requiring this kind of functionality, distributed randomness.
Yeah, I also agree that it's about time. There's probably, actually, I come from a gaming background. My first startup 15 years ago was in the gaming background. And I used to complain always to my partner that I don't feel like this data is correct. I don't know if I can trust the system, but I had no recourse. There's no public verifiability. You can easily imagine some startup out there, it won't be us, but that will use DeFi primitives like peer-to-peer pooling of funds, and then using some sort of verifiable random function to do a global lottery, right? And it could be massive.